All right, good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that the procedure bylaw prescribes the use of technology during meetings. It is 5 o'clock. I will call this council meeting to order. And as we begin our meeting, I acknowledge that we are gathered on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We respectfully acknowledge that the Mississauga and Anishinaabe are historically the stewards of this place we now call Brighton. As we hear the truths behind our shared history, reconcile them with our past and with who we know that we are today, we acknowledge that we are working toward right relations as good treaty people. In particular, we are grateful to work in partnership with our neighbors from the Alderville First Nation. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council approve the March 2nd, 2026 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council having any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. I have a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council resolve itself into closed session at 5:01 p.m. pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended for the following reasons. 239(2)E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And 239(2)F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And for the purposes of receiving advice and being advised by counsel with respect to pending events related to an upcoming hearing, and receiving advice that being advised by counsel on the outcome of a judicial pretrial. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. I'll give staff a moment to transition into the closed session. Okay, thank you. We are now back in open session. It is 5:39. Council will recess until 6:30 PM. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It is 6:30 p.m. I'll call this meeting back to order. I will ask everyone who's now joining us for the open session to silence cell phones and other electronic devices. Council has already done so at the beginning of our meeting at 5 o'clock. Excuse me. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that Council rise and report from closed session March 2nd, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. in accordance with the Municipal Act, Subsection 239(2), to discuss matters pertaining to subsections F and E of the Municipal Act 2001 to receive solicitor-client privileged advice, and to be advised of the outcome of a judicial pretrial and be advised as to the pending events related to an upcoming hearing, and further that council received confidential information and provided directions. No motions arose directly from the closed session, and that a procedural motion to adopt the closed session minutes of February 17th, 2026 was voted on during the closed session. Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to the adoption. Oh, members of council, have you any announcements? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. At our last meeting, I mentioned that I was participating in the push-up challenge benefiting Canadian Mental Health Association, CMHA, and it has now finished. I did make my 2,000 push-ups, although some of them were squats. My team of 8 Brightonians all made our 2,000 goal and raised over $1,500, about half of which came from members of council and staff. So thank you to everyone who supported. Really appreciate that. Overall, 104,000 Canadians participated in the challenge, did 76 million push-ups and raised $3.7 million for CMHA. So thank you to everyone. It was a good time. And I'm way buffer now than I was before.
I could tell when you came in the room. Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon, and congratulations to you and your team of what I assume are mostly Brightonians who took part in that. Thank you for that. Any other announcements? That brings us to the adoption of the minutes. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council adopt the February 17th, 2026 Council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening. There are no delegations or presentations listed on the agenda, which brings us to citizens' comments. Madam Clerk, I'm pretty sure there is a citizens' comment this evening. Citizens' comment is an opportunity for members of the public to submit comments or ideas to council on matters appearing before council on tonight's agenda. A maximum of 10 minutes is set aside for citizens' comments, which leaves each speaker with 2 minutes to provide council with their comment. It is noted that language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Comments will be received without comment, debate, or question from council. I, as the presiding officer, may request clarification and/or additional information on the comments from the member of the public. This citizen's comment comes from Phyllis Lanham with regard to electronic internet voting. Mrs. Lanham, please, you may approach.
So I don't think I need that.
Okay, yeah, I remember hearing you across the hall.
Anyhow, as someone who spent decades in this community, first working here and now living here as a senior, I can say that my perspective has changed. I now see more clearly the importance of how decisions affect residents at different stages of life. This proposal is not simply about modernization. It is about whether we are accommodating and appreciating the needs of all of the citizens, particularly the most vulnerable. That is not optional. It is a core responsibility of this council. Eliminating in-person voting removes choice. It assumes that one model serves everyone equally. I do not believe that is the case. Modernization should expand access and not reduce it. I respectfully urge the council to consider a hybrid model that preserves inclusion for all residents. This town is made up of a large portion of seniors, many of whom don't own computers, are afraid to use them, and yet we are asking them to do something that is very difficult. So on behalf of those seniors, I would respectfully ask you to reconsider what you have said. These two ladies that I have with me are two ladies who knew absolutely nothing about the online voting only, and I have yet to find one person in this town or in the surrounding community who knows anything about it. So though I understand you have made it public somewhere, I have not seen it, nor has anyone that I have spoken with. I think they have a right to have a voice and to vote in the upcoming election. So please, for the seniors, change and add either mail or in-person voting. Thank you for hearing me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mrs. Lanham. We appreciate your comment. Motion is moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that Council receive the citizens' comments submitted at the March 2nd, 2026 Council meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. I will note that we have correspondence from Mrs. Lanham, including a petition to review later on in tonight's agenda. That brings us to staff reports. The first report is with regard to brand implementation guideline and development plan. Community Engagement Officer Scott, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander. I would also like to add that we will be hosting the brand launch event on April 30th at 10 a.m. at the Owen Gibb Community Center. This will be a presentation as well as highlighting the new logo for the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Scott. The motion is moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receive the brand implementation guideline and development plan as information. Questions or comments from members of Council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next item is the CAO ongoing report and capital projects update. CAO, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, Mr. Mayor, not at this time.
Yep. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receive the CAO ongoing report and capital projects update. Is there any discussion from members of Council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next is notices of motion and motions. The motion before us was read into the record or provided in the record last meeting, so becomes a motion this evening, and it's moved by Councillor Wheeldon and seconded by Councillor McCausland. Everybody buckle up. Whereas the municipality of Brighton delegates members of council to various boards and committees that represent significant public interest and initiatives that affect residents. And whereas Brighton is historically, culturally, and geographically a farming community, and whereas agriculture remains Brighton's second largest industry, driving our local economy, and whereas food is an essential aspect of health and well-being, culture, and community, and whereas food security and affordability are rising issues of concern, and whereas despite being an agricultural community, Northumberland does not produce enough food to be self-sufficient or sustainable, and whereas farming faces major challenges related to economic sustainability, land access, farmland conversion, and farm succession, whereas agriculture plays an important role in environmental sustainability, and whereas the Northumberland County Food Policy Council serves to support food systems in Northumberland through convening stakeholders and advocating for policies that ensure local food production and equitable access to food are sustainable. And whereas every Northumberland municipality has endorsed the Northumberland Food Charter prepared by the Northumberland County Food Policy Council, and whereas the Northumberland County Food Policy Council is also supported by Lakelands Public Health, and whereas the Northumberland County Food Policy Council is comprised primarily of volunteers and would be greatly enhanced by increased participation from stakeholder groups, and whereas the Northumberland County Food Policy Council meets periodically either in person or virtually to discuss matters of municipal land use planning, economic development, cultural and educational events, and other matters of municipal interest. Now therefore be it resolved that the municipality of Brighton regularly appoint one member of council to the Northumberland County Food Policy Council, and be it further resolved that this motion be circulated to other Northumberland municipalities to encourage similar representation from across Northumberland. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I joined the Northumberland County Food Policy Council, I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, just as a resident, as a realtor who sometimes works with farmers who have a hard time finding farmland that they can afford, because farmland is worth more as building lots than it is as active farms. Recognizing that 2/3 of farmers are expected to retire in the coming decade, and more than 90% of them do not have succession plans, relying on the value of their farm to fund their retirement, and therefore selling to the higher bidder rather than necessarily the farmer who wants to continue farming, and that this is generally unsustainable. And also recognizing the great strides that Northumberland County has already made with the Agri-Food Venture Center, for example, supporting the economy around food, but still recognizing that most of our farmers, or a great many of our farmers, are farming cash crops that are export commodities rather than feeding us locally. And recognizing that we're not playing any sort of active role in facilitating sustainable food systems, but the Food Policy Council is. And so this tweaked my interest for a lot of really good reasons. And recognizing that there has been municipal representation in the past. When I joined the Food Policy Council, the CAO of Trent Hills was on the council. She has since moved and has not been replaced there. We do have representation from the health unit there. We do have support from Northumberland County in theory, and from lower tier municipalities in theory. But generally it's being run by volunteers. The last event we had representation from a councillor from Port Hope was there as well. We're being supported by the Center for Healthy Communities at Loyalist College, which has been convening stakeholders to try and envision sustainable food systems in Northumberland that can keep more money locally and help farm succession problems and land access issues and food security matters, all of these things. And so that it seemed like a really important moment for an injection of support. And there were some people calling for some kind of intermunicipal task force, and Councillor Holloway-Wadwani and I said, oh, sure, we know who would already volunteer to be there, the same people that are on all the other intermunicipal task forces. And I thought, no, why don't we just acknowledge that we have a vested interest in this group, and the things that it's trying to produce or support or facilitate are in all of our interests at the municipal level. And so that's why I wrote this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Botwell.
You must have read my mind. I didn't have my hand up.
I saw you put your hand up before I called on Councillor Wheeldon.
Did you? Oh. So in reading the motion, it seems like it's much more of a staff type position, either through planning or something, rather than having a counselor assigned to it.
Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
I'm not married to it being a council representation. As I said, it was Trent Hills CAO, not a councillor or mayor, who was there. So, yeah, it would make sense to me as a planning or an active thing. I have attended a Northumberland County planners meeting. Director Walsh was there, along with the chair, Russ Christensen, and our secretary, Aisha Malik, from the health unit. We did attend a planning thing, so it would make sense for planning. It would make sense for ECDEV. Both of them are pretty busy right now, and I'm here because I'm interested, but it won't always be me and shouldn't always be me. So
go ahead. Follow.
Just follow up to that. So it doesn't say anything in here, but you're making the assumption that it would be you in creating this position?
Absolutely not. I just want to make sure that we are represented and supportive. It doesn't have to be me. And I don't want even the implication that I'm making a job for myself. I would continue to volunteer no matter what, I think.
No, I'm sure you would. I see it being much more of an appointee from the municipality, and depending on what items are being discussed, discussion amongst staff to determine who would be best able to represent Brighton and area on a long-term basis rather than especially at this point with so little left in this term, on a term-by-term basis.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley.
Oops, thank you, Mayor. Points well taken, Councillor Butwell. I certainly echo what you were saying, and I think the same thing, although we have just a few months left in this term as to how we could roll out something a bit better, but it would maybe be a good jumping off point to have at least one or two meetings where we could get our head around, or staff could get our head around something as to how we could proceed with that over the next 4 years.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you for that, councillors, both of you. And to speak to that point, the reason I'm bringing this motion now is because I can't assume that I'll be on council next term. And right now I am volunteering on that group and able to bring those ideas to council. But I would love for that connection to be well established no matter what happens this fall.
Anybody else? Is the Food Policy Council aware that you're bringing this motion? Are they in favor and endorsing the concept?
They are, yeah. I think long-term, they would like to be more entwined with municipalities rather than less.
Thank you. We've heard from council that we would like to see it, maybe not a member of council, but perhaps we could change the second last line to therefore be it resolved that Municipality of Brighton Council regularly appoints one representative from the municipality to the Northumberland, et cetera, et cetera. It could be a member of council, it could be a member of staff. But then we have to have the conversation about the mechanism by which we would make that appointment. So do we want to have a staff report come back? CAO.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just taking a quick look at the terms of reference for this organization, it specifically does speak to a council representative from each of the Northumberland County municipalities. So I think having a motion to appoint a member of council would be fine. They also do speak to a single CAO. So I think that's where Ms. Phillips from Trent Hills held that role within the terms of reference. So I don't know that at this point, it would be appropriate to appoint a staff member without having further conversations about their terms of reference and in what capacity that would be, whether it would just be a member or some specific role that they may have for staff. So I think if you want to give staff an opportunity to come back, we can have dialogue and bring something back to council.
So I'm hearing that based on the terms of reference, we should leave it as a member of council, that we should not change that line. And that because we wouldn't want to presume what the Food Policy Council wants. They've already created their terms of reference and are specific about who they want as representation. But then I would ask the mover and seconder if we could add a line that we direct staff to bring back a report. And in that, part of that report could be asking council then to appoint a member to the Food Policy Council. Councillor Wheeldon.
Could we not just do a motion to refer? And then we'd get the report back and.
We could. I just don't want to have to read this whole motion over again in another meeting.
Fair. I'm very happy to pass it.
Peace, buddy.
I'm very happy to pass it and get a report back. That's fine.
It's up to you as the mover. If you want to put a motion to refer on the floor, I'm happy to read that. And if not.
No, I mean, if we're happy to pass it now and also get a report, that's great.
Sorry, Councilor McCausland, I should ask if you're okay with me adding that to the, okay. So the last line now reads, and further that council directs staff to review and provide a report at a future meeting. Is that okay with you, Councilor McCausland? Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councillor Wheeldon, how often does this group meet? And not being totally familiar with this group or this policymaker, could you give us some ideas as to what they're doing so far?
Sure. We have been meeting every other month. occasionally in person whenever we can, but very often just virtually. The most recent thing we've been doing, as I mentioned earlier, we have met with planners to advocate for planning changes regarding the official plan amendments with agricultural area and things like that. Specific planning issues could specific planning regulations can either encourage or discourage small farms, and small farms being something that we want to encourage on the Food Policy Council. So we did that. Lately, we've been working with the help of the Center for Healthy Communities at Loyalist College to bring together people from across Northumberland who have interest or concerns in food policy with regard to, we've had people from farmers markets, small farmers, people who are wanting to farm but don't have access to the land because they don't have millions of dollars. People who want to improve food processing. And so we're trying to look at the entire web of a food system from all of the different perspectives and figure out what would a sustainable food system for Northumberland look like, including matters of production, distribution, processing, all of those things, but then also food security, consumption, affordability, sustainability, all of those things. And so we've had a few sessions in the last couple months that have been oriented around actually generating reports that we can then translate into policy at our municipalities. And it makes sense to have either staff or particularly councillors involved in that process so that we can be bringing those ideas back to our councils and moving those issues forward.
Councillor Botwell, did you put your hand up again?
Again, I don't think I did, but I was thinking of questions.
Oh, you go right ahead.
I'm not entirely sure why this idea is sticking in the back of my throat. And I don't believe there's any kind of bias, but in having a quick little read through, are the policies that this committee, this group comes up with, are they binding across the different municipalities or the county?
Well, the group came up with a food charter, which every municipality in Northumberland adopted, but that was several years ago. What we're producing right now will be the basis of policies should any municipality adopt them. But it's not writing policy for municipalities. It's writing policy and saying, hey, we wrote a good policy. We think you should adopt this. What do you think?
Okay, so this is all like, it's a group of volunteers who got together, created this group out of a common interest to achieve certain things to be discussed, to come up with policies and shop the policies around to councils, just like at a core, very high level stuff.
Sure.
So it seems like a huge overarching portfolio when we talk about food distribution, food processing, land use planning. It to me feels like it does not belong. It doesn't, that it's far too reaching. And it, for lack of a better term, it's like creating another level of bureaucracy to talk about important food issues. But we're talking at a level that's not even, like, it's not even binding. It's people coming up with potentially great ideas, but maybe they need to start higher. When we talk about food production and processing, that's something that our economy desperately is lacking. But that is a national issue. That is not really a municipal issue. Go ahead.
So this is, I would say that it is more of a think tank than a bureaucracy. It doesn't have any power over anything. And so it is supportive of municipalities rather than something that is restrictive to local policy or something like that. Food policy councils started in the 80s in Toronto. Our current chair, Russ Christensen, who lives in Trent Hills, was one of the founders of the Toronto one back in the 80s. I think I'm getting that correctly. And so these ideas have been around for a long time, 40 plus years at this point. And that idea that started in Toronto has since spread all over the world. And it is just a way of supporting agricultural communities through good policy, and through policy recommendations that generally get accepted and supported locally. I have not yet seen the Northumberland County Food Policy Council make policy recommendations and have no agreement from municipalities. Even our brief meeting with the planners, that we had a lively discussion, but there was a lot of head nodding about like, oh yeah, that seems like a good idea. We'll take that into account. So it is about applying an agricultural and food systems lens to existing policies that affect local agricultural economies at municipal level. And so just as we have a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee here in Brighton, where the purpose of which is to look at municipal policy issues and events and issues in the community through equity, diversity, and inclusion lenses. Similarly, the Food Policy Council tries to do that for the food systems lens. And the one that we have is functioning at an intermunicipal level, at a county level.
Now, just in response, so this Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee is the one that we were talking about in our break, that you said we don't actually have the ability to accomplish much and we might want to look at disbanding it.
That's not exactly what I said when we were off microphone during the break. What I did say was that since we've established lower tier policy of equity, diversity, and inclusion here at the Municipality of Brighton, the committee that we formed in order to bring that lens has largely now codified that lens into our policies at the municipality. And so in that way, it has achieved its goal in a lot of respects. The Food Policy Council has not yet achieved its goal because our food systems in Northumberland, as you mentioned, are somewhat lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an initiative that there's lots of work left to be done in that file. From a policy perspective, and if we had policies in every Northumberland municipality that were actively supporting integrated food systems in ways that make our agricultural economy thrive, then we'd probably be having a similar conversation about the Food Policy Council and saying, has it worked itself out of a job? Ultimately, that's the goal of all committees, I think, and hopefully we'll see the day when that happens.
If I may again,
Carry on.
sir. You mentioned that the food charter was adopted across the municipalities, the county. Is that food charter not essentially the same as our DEI lens that we had through policy brought into the municipality? And the issues that we're looking at, which are numerous and some way too large for this forum, those to me now, instead of planning, I'm now leaning more towards economic development. So I see this as an economic development file or a planning file, not something that councillors participate in. We take our advice from our experts, and they're the ones who have the full background on everything. I'm more than happy to have someone currently, someone future from either or both of those departments participate. I really don't think it's the best use of the municipal resource, which is ourselves. And I really want to stay away from this, but I understand that you are part of this committee already, but all it does in turn is make one more committee appointment for the sake of what I don't quite understand.
So before you respond to that, I would say that if any other board or group came to us and said we want a member of council appointed, because it's in our terms of reference, we wouldn't prosecute their terms of reference. So we've heard tonight that the terms of reference of the Food Policy Council is to have every council appoint a member of council. So the question of whether we would appoint a councillor or a member of staff isn't one we should prosecute tonight, because we don't get to decide their terms of reference. The only thing we get to decide is, do we want to in fact appoint a member of council? That's really the only question to be asked.
So may I'm just ask you this, you have more experience than I do. I could create a citizens group tomorrow sign up 20 people and ask for a counselor
You could,
to come and be paid to
Yes.
sit and
you could make that request. That's correct.
really. Well, this could very easily become a job that is no longer part-time if every group asked for a counselor.
But you could talk to my dear sweet wife about whether my job is part-time or not.
Well, I know your job's not part-time.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. To your point, Councillor Butwell, I do think that there's a significant economic development component to this. We do have at least two economic development related committees that we appoint councillors to. I want to say maybe three. And yes, we do rely on the expertise provided through that committee, but we do have council representation in those places. We do not have, unless you count the Rural Advisory Committee, we do not have an agriculture related group in this agriculture town. So that was the recommendation. The Food Policy Council is looking for more support, and they are looking to do good things that we all have an interest in. And I think mostly what they need is representation in some sense that we are working together toward better systems. And so council representation is a way of providing that level of support, not necessarily financial support. Even we've had some people say, well, I can write grants for you. And we say, well, we don't really need money. What we need is people engaged in making the changes that we need.
To Councillor Wheeldon, so I sit on the Rural Advisory Committee, and there is a general sense that the rural community is ignored, that the wheels just don't turn at the same speed. Has the committee, the group, thought to approach the Rural Advisory Committee, who already have a lot of these issues on their radar?
No, the Food Policy Council has asked to appoint members of council rather than approach committees.
Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. This back and forth conversation has given me some lots to think about, and especially when you talk that this has started back in the 80s, so 40 years of what has been accomplished. And when I think historically, when you talk about processing and producing all of the, over the years, I think of the county where things have just kind of gone down the toilet, for lack of better words. I wonder how you can revive all of that. I'm thinking that your goals, to me, don't seem attainable at this stage, and especially for just a small government like ours, just the county. So I'm just not sure. Certainly it's good to have conversation and updates from groups like this. I'm just not sure where we benefit from all of this. I'm just not getting it yet.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Rowley. I should say that the original Food Policy Council in Toronto was back in the 80s. The one in Northumberland, I think, dates back to the mid 2000s. So it's been around for a while. Food Policy Council's Northumberland Food Charter was adopted, and we are making progress in terms of changing small policies here and there that support agriculture. So, these are things that the community is invested in. As I said, Trent Hills had until very recently been appointing a CAO. The health unit has a paid member of staff at this, and so they support it from a food security perspective. And we are making progress in a lot of things, but none of that progress depends specifically on the municipality of Brighton. Again, this is a resource to Brighton, not something that we need to be bankrolling, not something that we're responsible for. It's almost a freebie to us. The only cost being that we would presumably, if we're appointing a member, pay for them to go to a meeting.
Councillor Butwell.
To Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, you said you have had these small wins outside of the food charter. Any example that would be in Brighton? With the, sorry?
Carry on. I was going to call on Councillor Wheeldon to answer the question, but you weren't done the question. Carry on.
No, I was just going to ramble. Go ahead.
Councillor Wheeldon.
So I would say that the progress that I've been personally involved in was that meeting with the planners. We had identified a specific policy that that is in the Planning Act or in the provincial policy statement. I think Director Walsh had identified it as coming from somewhere in 1977, something like that. There is in provincial policy a recommendation that no severance occur on agriculturally designated land to make a lot that's less than 100 acres or 40 hectares. And it does couch that number in terms that are permissive, in the sense that it says, you know, you can do this. We don't recommend you make small lots. The idea being that small lots are more likely to become estate lots rather than active farms. But the impact that this has had, especially when it's being applied really stringently, in a lot of municipalities and a lot of municipal planners will look to that and say, no, we cannot have a lot less than 100 acres. The impact of that is that there is a very clear pattern of farmland consolidation in which farms get bigger, not smaller. And as farmers retire or age out, their farms are bought out by their neighbors. And so we end up with fewer farmers farming more land, which encourages a model of farming that is more industrial agriculture, depending on multi-million-dollar machines that produce commodities that are exported abroad, which means that it's food that's not feeding local people. And so there aren't local markets. There isn't local upgrading, except for the Agri-Food Venture Center. And so the farming economy is largely not local, even though it is our second biggest industry in Brighton. And if somebody wants to get into a market gardening situation or something like that, the farmland that is available is largely at least 100 acres at a time. You can't do a market garden that's on 100 acres. You know, a market garden might use 5 acres. And so all these people who want to get into farming and become the next generation of farmers are in a situation where if they want to become a farmer, they need millions of dollars to buy land and equipment. And they are incentivized away from market gardening or other types of agriculture that are more supportive to the local economy. And so what we asked as a Food Policy Council was, can we make it clear in the Northumberland County official plan that this 40 hectare or 100 acre minimum lot size is a guideline, not a rule, so that when somebody comes to us and says, I really want to make a small farm, we have it explicitly in writing, yes, this is the kind of thing that we allow in certain situations where you want to do this market garden. Because we need to change the direction of this trend of bigger and bigger and bigger and more industrial farms. And so that small policy change, I don't know if that actually ended up making a difference. Director Walsh, I don't know if you can follow up on that or if we're even at that stage yet, but that could make a big difference if it is enacted.
Be brief. That's not a quip.
Yeah, so in the planning world, of course, you've described it really well. It's really a top-down process, starting with the province. So you mentioned the Foodland Guidelines from 1978. That was a precursor to anything issued under the Planning Act or under Section 3, the policy statements. Now it's a comprehensive set of policy statements issued through one ministry as opposed to multiple ministries, such as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, Rural Affairs. So that's to say that the province is still advocating to keep the parcel sizes as large as possible. Now, historically, they don't seem to object in the event that someone can make use of a smaller parcel for an intensive farming operation, such as something that requires a large investment but small acreage. High pedigree breeding of horses. Different really specialty crops and things like that can be economically viable on a small acreage. So there have been exceptions for what I would call capital intensive agricultural operations that don't need a large land area. They don't happen very often. it would be useful, as we discussed in that meeting, that to take a inventory of the existing 10-acre lots or so in the county and see in the agricultural areas and see what use is being made of them. And see if that current supply is really being absorbed with any real market gardening. If not, then I guess we kind of have our answer in terms of demand. But yeah, the concern is that they become estate lots with a whole bunch of collection of various things that aren't agricultural in nature. And that creates a bit of an impediment for some farmers who do need to do spreading manure and spraying and work during nighttime operations, et cetera, dust, large tractor movements on roadways, all those sorts of things that people busy wanting to get to work early in the morning and have a restful night's sleep don't really like.
Thank you, Director Walsh, and that was Director Walsh's way of being brief, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. I just want to circle back to the question being asked of council, which is not to prosecute the Food Policy Council's initiatives and work, but whether we want to appoint someone to it. Circulate the question for encouragement of other members, of other member municipalities, and direct staff to provide a report. Those are the three things we're being asked to consider. I would suggest if we want to prosecute the Food Policy Council's initiatives, we should go ahead and do this. Let the minutes come back to council over a period of time and then prosecute whether or not we want to continue on. That's my suggestion, but I leave it to council. Any further discussion before I call the vote? I am not reading it again. With the exception of the last line, you can read it in your package, my friends. And the last line reads, and further that council directs staff to review and provide a report at a future meeting. Is there any further discussion from members of council? Councillor Butwell.
Could we define a date or a future meeting date rather than future meeting being?
I'm happy to do that, but I didn't hear it from anybody. So when CAO, when would be a reasonable timeline for staff? Do you
True,
figure
Mr. Mayor. I don't think it will take us a long time. I'm sure we can have it back to you in April.
the first meeting in April?
Sure.
I was thinking longer, but I just didn't want to have it open-ended.
I guess my only question when we're looking at appointing a member of council, is it the intent of this council to look at that for the next term and not appoint for the balance? Just, I heard that in discussion. So when we're preparing this, if I could get a sense of that, it would just help us as to how we present it back to you.
Members of council? Councillor Wheeldon?
I'm fine with it being for next term. I'm currently fulfilling that function in a non-official sense right now. I'm not in a hurry to change things in that regard. So next term is fine.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Rowley?
I would agree with that. I think, let's just leave it till the next term. There's very few decisions that this council is going to be able to make in a few months anyway, so just leave it till.
Thank you. I've changed the line from report at a future meeting to report at the first regular meeting of April. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. There's only one bylaw for consideration. It's the assumption of lands to form a public highway. Purposes along White's Road. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to assume lands for public highway purposes along White's Road for the corporation of the municipality of Bright. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to reports, minutes of advisory committees of council and review teams. This is a report from me with regard to a report on the attendance at the 2026 Rural Ontario Municipal Association Conference and Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative Confluence Forum. I, along with Deputy Mayor Anderson, Councillor Butwell, Councillor Wheeldon, and Councillor Wright, attended the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, and it was immediately followed by the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative Confluence, which I attended in the afternoon ending Roma. I have nothing to add to the report. It was circulated to the other 4 members of council who attended. Motion is moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council receive the report from the attending members regarding the 2026 Rural Ontario Municipal Association Annual Conference and the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative Confluence Forum. Is there any discussion from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The first comes from Lower Trent. It is the 2026 final budget. Councillor Wheeldon, do you have anything to add or highlight on this?
No, we've commented on the budget before, only to say that until everything changes, everything will stay the same.
It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the Lower Trent Conservation 2026 final budget for information. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next piece of minutes comes from the Lakelands Public Health Board meeting summary of February 18th, 2026. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council received the February 18th, 2026 Lakelands Public Health Board summary as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And finally, the Brighton Public Library Board, January 28th, 2026 meeting. Who is our rep on that? Is that you, Councillor McCausland? Anything to add or highlight on these?
No, not at this time, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. I have a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the January 28th, 2026 Brighton Public Library Board meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. First piece of correspondence comes from the Down Syndrome Association of Northumberland. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive or support the request from the Down Syndrome Association of Northumberland for flag raising on March 21st, 2026 in recognition of International Down Syndrome Day. Councillor Rowley, thank you. Councillor Wheeldon, you're okay with that, I assume? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
Sorry, I don't want to discuss this motion, but because we were talking flags and I noticed last week that we were flying the flags for the Lions Club. Was that not?
Women's Institute.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
What's that? All in favor of the motion? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. Can't speak to that. The next comes from the Community Foundation, Campbellford Seymour. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council support the request from Community Foundation, Campbellford Seymour in Northumberland to proclaim the week of May 4th to 8th, 2026, the 25th anniversary of CSCF, which is the Community Foundation, Campbellford Seymour. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next piece of correspondence comes from Phyllis Lanham with regard to internet voting. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. Whereas the Municipality of Brighton Council has approved the use of an internet voting model for the 2026 municipal election, and whereas the correspondence received raises concerns regarding the potential impact of eliminating traditional voting methods, and whereas the Municipality of Brighton is committed to ensuring barrier-free accessible participation for all electors through a series of supports, and whereas Brighton utilized an internet voting model in the previous municipal election, achieving a voter turnout of approximately 47%, and whereas council continues to prioritize democratic participation, accessibility, privacy, security, and meaningful voter engagement in its election planning. Now therefore be it resolved that council receives the correspondence and petitions submitted by Phyllis Lanham, and further that the correspondence be referred to staff for review, including consideration of the questions and concerns raised, and that staff include this information as part of the ongoing work related to the accessibility plan for the 2026 municipal election. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. Next item comes from Skate Canada. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon that council support the request from Skate Canada Brighton to waive all ice fees for the annual Skate Carnival, Sunday, March 29th, 2026. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
This is something we've done before, correct?
Say again?
This is something that we've done before.
We've done
supported
it every year that I can remember, yes. Any further discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried.
Can I go back one? I
Yep.
wanted to say something.
Sure.
Or you can say no.
You may.
Regarding the correspondence from Mrs. Lanham.
Right.
Staff will review this. Does that mean we will get a report back from staff at some point? Just
Yes,
so that the public's aware of that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. That brings us to FYI correspondence. The first is from J.L. Richards and Associates, is moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council received the Brighton wastewater treatment system upgrades progress update report number 1 from J.L. Richards and Associates for information purposes. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley?
Glad to see it's moving along.
You're here. Anyone else? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next is updates from Northumberland County. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council received the Northumberland County updates February 16th to 27th, 2026 for information. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And from Brighton Marine Rescue, it's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council received the letter of gratitude from Brighton Marine Rescue. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery who has a question with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? Is there anyone, see if someone comes up. Is there anyone online for that purposes? No, thank you. My question is, do you have any questions of anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? That's my only question. Yes. We will receive a staff report back and council will have discussions at that time. You're welcome. You're welcome. So for the public who may be viewing, Mrs. Lanham asked, will the group hear back with regard to online voting? And the answer was staff will provide council with a report for council and the public to review. That brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on March 2nd, 2026. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And finally, a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the March 2nd, 2026 council meeting adjourn at 7:23 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Drive home safely, everyone, and may God save the King.